Welcome kindreds, it's Jessica the Story Witch and you're watching the A to Z of Modern Witchcraft series that I'm making on my channel. And today we are on letter R. And R I decided to talk about, I was going to talk about roots and I was going to talk about reading, but then I thought no, actually I'm going to make it a little bit broader than both of those, and R is for research. And the reason that I wanted to include that in this series is because I see different approaches to walking this path, and that's wonderful. We're all individuals and we all choose our way of walking this path. We all choose how we grow and what we want to go to next. And I see some people who love to research in books, and they love to read, and they love stories, and they love information books, and they'll just kind of eat them all up, and maybe they'll make notes, and I am one of those people. And I see people who love to learn by watching videos and listening to podcasts, and they like to try things that the people they're inspired by on YouTube are talking about, you know. So they'll search a video for a specific thing and they'll try doing that certain thing, so they kind of research and then they do, and that is a wonderful way of doing things as well. And I am somewhat like that. I tend to like to look at things and research things from a broad spectrum of places, and then research myself. And what I mean by that is I like to, like, if say I read about a particular practice in a book, I like to read it and then perhaps make some notes about it. And then I usually like to try it out as it is in the book, without kind of changing anything too much first of all, and then making notes about how that went for me. And perhaps depending on how it goes, I would perhaps do that a few times, you know, because if it kind of spoke to me enough that I thought I wanted to try it, then I think you should at least give it kind of like a fair go. That's how I feel about it. So I like to try it a few times, and then often I will find like, well, I like that and that seemed to work really well, but that little part of it just felt like not quite right to me. Especially if sometimes in some of the books you get, especially if there's like spell work and stuff, there may be certain incantations which they recommend that you say, and quite often that doesn't feel right to me. So I will try it in that way, and then I will tweak it and do it my own way. And that's why I feel like research it needs to work on all of those levels. We need that kind of book learning and consuming of resources from ideally a wide variety of places, because if you've just got one book and that's the book that you're kind of pulling all of your information from, that's problematic to me, because there is a lot of, well, sometimes just downright wrong information in some of the books, especially with things like herb information and stuff like that. With things like that, you do need to make sure you've done your research. And to be honest, for herbalism and plant medicine in general, I find having books that are non-witchcraft based but are actually medicinally based, or like horticultural books, are a better resource than craft books. You know, even in some of like Scott Cunningham, you know, with some of his associations, some of the things he says about the herbs, it's always best to check in a few different places, especially if you're going to be consuming a herb, or especially if there's any sort of dosage recommended. I would say research that in a variety of places and look at the source. Look at the source. If it is a published book and by a reputable publisher, so, you know, in the witchcraft community, Llewellyn is a publisher that is well known by everyone, not necessarily well liked by everybody, but you know, it's respected. It is they're a long established publisher. or, you know, mainly of Wiccan type books, or for a traditional craft, then Troy Books, you know, is a good source of solid information. They're an established publisher. But now it's very easy for people to publish, self-publish books as well, especially like in ebook format, but also in printed book format. So just because something is written in a book doesn't necessarily make it true. And I know this is obvious, really, in a way, you know, but I do see people taking what is in the book as truth, you know. So I would definitely recommend researching around. And this kind of links back a little bit, I guess, to what I talked about in the J's for Judgment episode of this series, where I was talking about judgment and discernment. There's a lot of kind of, well, like if you go on Tumblr, which I tend not to do, and on Amino as well, or Amino, I'm never quite sure how you're supposed to say that. There's some really great information, and then there's a lot of information which people have kind of printed and then somebody else has regurgitated the same thing, and because it's popping up everywhere, people are like seeing it and thinking that it must be true because it's in a lot of different places. Or like memes, if you're getting your information from memes, then it's just using your common sense, really, isn't it? And I know, like, if you're watching this and you like my channel, then obviously you're going to be probably not in the category of people who are basing their information on kind of dubious sources. But for all of us, I try and make sure my sources are as broad as possible, and also not getting stuck in the same authors that I know I like and come back to all the time, trying new things as well, you know, and kind of taking my research, keeping current, seeing what the books are that are coming out now, what are the people who are talking about things now, you know, especially for certain topics like tarot. YouTube it's the best, I feel like, resource for tarot information. There are people on here who could be teaching courses, well, who are teaching courses, and people are paying them for teaching, but they're giving away so much information for free on YouTube, and it's amazing. So YouTube is definitely up there for me in the place to research stuff. It's also such a fantastic resource for finding out about new things, which then you can then research in different places, you know, and kind of follow that up as well. So that kind of taking from outer sources is really, really important. But then, like I was talking about at the beginning of this video, there's that different kind of research, that research that we do by doing, that practice, building on what we talked about in the last video, or the one before that. So you've got the kind of the information gathering from exterior sources, and then you get the information that you gather from the practical doing, and that gives you a whole different level of feedback again. And like if you work with spirit and things like that, that'll be part of your feedback on that level too. And then you can weave those things together, and then it becomes your own, doesn't it? Because you have researched it in a head kind of swords kind of way, and you've put it into practice in a very kind of earthy pentacles type of way. So yeah, that's just my thoughts on research. And it probably, now I've started talking about it, seems really obvious, but it's more, I suppose, aimed at people who are kind of new seekers and who don't necessarily, aren't in a place yet to know if something is good information or not. And like still now, you know, I read some stuff and I'm like, okay, that's different. I almost fall into the trap sometimes of being like, well, that is not how I do things. So that must be rubbish. But that's not true either, you know. So it's also for those of us who've been doing it a long time, it's part of our keeping current, part of our keeping fresh, is to be still researching things that lie beyond our current practice, and also trying things in our practices that do take us out of that comfort zone in a way, so that we are always learning and we are always growing. You know, research, we're still searching, we are still seeking, we are all seekers all the way until the very end. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Warmest blessings, and I will see you very soon.